again, like I appreciate you taking the time. It means a lot to have your insight, especially from executives' perspective
I was going to say
of,
somebody who's come over from the dark side. Yeah.
yeah. It's not often you come across people like that. Usually it's the reverse. Usually it's the people who were working for the union that go over to the employer
Yeah.
side.
That is the union busting technique, in fact. Find the organizer and you promote them out of being able to organize. You give them something to lose.
Could you just give me like a brief overview of like who you are and where you used to work and all of that?
I'm an ex-executive of various video game studios. I spent 4 years as the general counsel of a video game studio called Bungie, which was during my time there acquired by Sony. The division of Sony that acquired it was Sony Interactive Entertainment, which is previously and more generally known as PlayStation. Before that, I was 12 years chief legal officer of Pokemon, literally of the Pokemon Company International. I ran worldwide business and legal affairs. Before that, I was the head lawyer for Microsoft Game Studios, which is the game development arm of Microsoft. I did that job for 3 years. Before that, I did a bunch of boring stuff like I did cryptography and cybersecurity, and I was a trial lawyer in Montreal, Canada. So that's the context. So how I got in touch with Chrissy, folks watching the recording, is one by way of I believe she's I don't think she's like a shop steward kind of thing, but Faye is a good human, and I saw her talking about stuff going on with IATSE, and I said, listen, I think IATSE is the proper organization to be unionizing the video game industry, precisely because IATSE knows how to handle gig workers, because the linear media business has been all gig workers for 60 years. Faye was kind enough to hook me up with Chrissy. The sales pitch I gave to Chrissy was, I'm the guy you used to call when you wanted to bust a union drive. I have not developed any of the tactics. I have not even had to implement any of the tactics because we were lucky enough that the people that were cranky enough to want to start unionization discussions were also good enough at their jobs that promoting them out of it solved two problems at once. I never had to actually do any hardcore busting, but I've been in enough meetings with enough people that I know exactly what is done to do it. So I hope that contextualizes me enough.
Yes. Thank you so much, Don.
I'm
Appreciate
over
that.
from the dark side.
Again, glad to have you talking with me today, and I would love to kind of pick your brain about all of that stuff. So maybe we could start with like the beginning of like hearing that there might be a unionization effort at a studio. Like what are those initial meetings like for execs? What are they talking about? What are they strategizing?
So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to a euphemism. Worker organization. Worker organization euphemism is a way that we don't even speak the word union into existence. It's a euphemism so we can talk about it without actually saying the word, because union is in management a four-letter word, as you probably know. Even though it's technically got 5 letters, it's really only got four. I may accidentally drop the worker organization euphemism when I'm talking. If I do, I'll try and correct myself, but just know that that's what I mean.
For sure.
Um, so what'll happen is this will usually come at you, if you're any good, this comes at you from your line level, either HR people or line level lawyers, where people will start to say, I'm starting to hear things that sound like people are starting to talk about unionization. My first reaction to that is always, well, guys, we got to be careful because that is Section 9 protected speech under the National Labor Relations Act. Let's not fuck ourselves into a federal investigation.
Hmm.
Because especially in the last few years, the Biden administration is pretty pro-union, and the National Labor Relations Board is always looking for something to do. Let's not invite the wolf inside. Let's not break into jail. So
Break
we'll
into
sit
jail. I like
back
that.
and we will listen. Okay, so what are they talking? Like, what are people complaining about? Can you won't say it out loud, but the first way you look at it is this the thing we can solve with a pizza party, right? That's not the way you describe it, but it's functionally that. Like, can we solve this with some dumb, stupid one-off crap? If yes, do that. If no, okay, what are they fucking complaining about? Are we going to have to promote some people? As anybody watching this video and as you, Chrissy, know, there's a delta between management and non-management insofar as management can't really properly unionize. And so the easiest way to get your union organizer out of being a union organizer is to promote them. Once you give them people who report to them, they are no longer a part of the bargaining unit. And so you take them out of the bargaining unit with a raise and a promotion, which of course looks like it'll be helpful for them going forward, and can be. Like, I don't want to be completely cynical about it, but also solves that particular problem. If you really can't promote the guy because they just suck, all right, and I say the guy because it's so often cranky men and not cranky women, because cranky women, unfortunately, in American society have just been socially inculcated to just suck it up, whereas cranky guys feel like they should get to be treated like men and, be treated with male privilege. So if you can't just promote the person, then the next thing you do is you figure out, okay, well, what do we do? We can't pizza party our way out of it. We can't just promote the guy out of it. All right, well, let's do what we can and start announcing forward-looking changes to employee situations such that, well, there's going to be big bonuses this year when the game ships. You don't want to fuck that up by
Mm-hmm.
by putting us in a situation where we're not able to pay bonuses anymore, right? There's a ton of FUD that goes out, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that goes out that I'm sure you're aware of. The big one is, well, we're not going to be able to pay bonuses if there's a union, because the same thing as people do with respect to tax cuts in national politics happens inside a workplace of, well, we can't treat one of you well because you are the one who would get the big bonus. Everybody always thinks it's going to be them who'll get the big bonus. We can't treat your bargaining unit well because, well, we got to treat those lazy asses over in the other team. If everybody's in a union, then even the lazy asses get to get a good bonus, and you're paying for it. And you sort of seed that back out. There's always the people that think they're about to go into management, and you can pass that story back through them. So that gets it down into the worker level, and that is often enough to stop a union drive right there. It becomes slightly more challenging to pull that shit when you're in a contraction period for the industry like we are right now, because people have watched other people lose their jobs. I mean, the first thing I'll tell you is even being in management doesn't get rid of layoffs. Because your boy here got laid off, and there is no better definition of an executive than your general counsel. Even being in management doesn't save you. In fact, it makes you, in many ways, much more of a target because they know exactly the consequence of you being gone, financially and otherwise.
I think one thing that people also might not fully understand, like there's stuff that all happens before a union is even formed. It's like when the whisper in the wind is like,
Yeah.
we're disgruntled and we want to change things here. That's when you start like doing that sort of kind of like tactical
Yes.
preemptive
Because
strike.
and I'm going to tie this to a related thing, which is if ever you hear, sort of management people talking about how everything's annoying in Europe, right? You don't want to have a studio in France because then you can't fire people. And what I always tell people is, France is just like being in the US with a union. It's not like you can't do anything. You just need to be ready to write a check. You have to treat your people like people.
Yeah.
And so what these people are signaling is they don't want to treat people like people. When they have well, you can't have people in France because then you can't fire them. Like, well, you can. You just got to pay severance.
We talked about it last week on our Twitch stream, but Ubisoft workers in France were on strike again after less
Yep.
than a year because they forced a return to work order. So yeah, I mean, like what type of other, so like there's the pizza party idea, right? But like, are there specific things that management might throw at workers that could feel like we're just trying to improve everything around here because we recognize that things are bad, but really it's just a way to get you to shut up and sit down? Like, are there other things like that?
A lot of what presents as benefits presents that way because you're hoping that it will have the effect that you just described. So, like stipends for home office is a good example, right? Or like work from home days. Like we'll go 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, right? And no one ever says it like I was about to say, and then I stopped it, which is what we call it is 3 days in the office, 4 days at home. Of course, you might work the weekend if you get used to working from home. A home office stipend helps you to pay for a home office, or like entertainment dollars, right? A lot of game studios used to, and many still do, have a $500, just use a round number, $500 entertainment dollars budget for you to spend on things like subscriptions to Hulu or Netflix or whatever. They look like benefits, but they're bribes. And
Yeah.
well, I mean, if you unionize, all the benefits, like the benefits all change because everything has to be regulated. Okay. You could still have those benefits. That's the big one is this the stuff that looks like oh, we care about our employees' payments usually comes about to shut up a discussion around worker unrest.
Speaking of that, how does management ultimately get this intel around their workers of like finding out that those conversations are happening? Is it kind of
A
like
combination of narcs and
happenstance or
quislings.
narcs and what was the other one?
Narcs and quislings.
What are quislings?
Quislings are so it's a term that appears to have fallen out of the vernacular. In the Second World War, there was a guy named Oswald Quisling who was the head of the Nazi Party of Norway, and he was in the government, and he basically cut the legs out from under the Norwegian government that allowed the Nazis to basically walk into Norway and take it over. So he's a traitor from the inside, and so you get your combination of Quislings and narcs, mostly because people, because employment status in the games industry is so precarious, people want to do what it takes to sort of, they think, well, if I look like a good guy, I'll get promoted. To which maybe
Yeah. Sell your soul to the devil and he might spare you, right?
sometimes the devil pays well. I can certainly tell you, I said in my bio at the beginning, I have a lot of boring stuff in my background. That boring stuff includes being a tobacco litigator and defending Amway and pyramid sales lawsuits. So I know about selling your soul to the devil.
We're sure.
I
That's
know what it
intense.
pays.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you talked about you mentioned it earlier, but like the promoting out, that's just
I
I
mean,
mean,
I'll tell you what was a funny one for me when I was at Bungie, when there was discussions of unionization there. So my employment lawyer was a woman named Lindsay. Um, she was in a meeting and somebody was like, "Do you think you and Dawn could do a presentation for us on unions?" And she came and told me this, and I was like, "How did you answer that?" And she said,
wow.
"Well, my answer was, I don't think you want the company's head lawyer telling you about unionization because he's probably got some positions that the company requires him to hold." And
Yeah.
I was like, that's a great way to put it, person who's never been trained for this question, because you didn't tell them they're not allowed to unionize. Good answer. No, we're not going to give them a presentation on how to because I like employment. Sometimes you find out weird ways like that, like somebody asks your employment lawyer.
Yeah. That's a little wild.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like asking for a captive audience meeting.
Yes.
Have you ever had to have like a prep for a captive audience meeting?
I have done captive audience meetings, but not quite in so many words, right? Like I've done the hey, I can tell there's some crankytude going on. I would like to set up an opportunity for people to come and yell at me, and I will take the aggro, and I will make you a promise that whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So I've done that meeting,
Hmm.
and you have to have a certain level of credibility with the employee level folks to be able to have that meeting and have it work.
Yeah.
But basically, I mean, I've gone in and harvested some grievances and sort of taken them out and been like, all right, gone back to HR and been okay. So we need to like this particular team, their manager's a fuckhead. We need to get rid of that person because this team all fucking hates us. And sorry to use the technical term, but these people, they're all going to quit, right? You didn't worry as much in sort of 2020, 2021 about people unionizing as you did about them just up and quitting.
Right.
Because if they were angry enough to unionize, they could get another job somewhere else. And
No.
especially back in the day when, if these people were young enough that they weren't so bought into the industry, they had mobility, they'd just leave.
Hmm.
Like we had situations when I was at Bungie that we had people saying, I've been offered another job at Facebook with $1 million non-refundable signing bonus. And I would be like, that guy should go work at Facebook. Because you know what? We aren't giving you $1 million non-refundable signing bonus. You
No.
should go to Facebook and take that and
Right.
then quit if you hate it
Hmm.
and come back and talk to us then
Yeah.
with Facebook's $1 million in your pocket. That's the thing. The amount of money that used to be just flowing around this industry was so much that that was why the promote them worked. And when the money started to look like it was drying up, frankly, like back in 2022, that was when I started to say, Jesus, these like we should be encouraging our people to join IATSE, frankly. Like
Hmm.
that's the right one, because then they can pivot to the movie industry and then come back. Like they can back and forth to another industry that uses the exact same skill set. And it's funny, I get every now and then people in the game space who are like, we're not all gig workers, asshole. And I'm like, you're not? Are you sure? Because it kind of seems like there's a lot of people getting laid off, and when that happens, they could pivot to a movie fairly easily. Like a lot of our skill sets, we even use the same names.
So I know like so maybe we could talk a bit about like severance packages.
Yeah.
Are those often or sometimes even
I was gonna
used as
say
a
there's a lot
way
of
to
fuckery that
like,
goes on in severance packages.
yeah,
Let me give you some things to watch out for, and then the stuff that I would recommend that goes should go into collective agreements.
okay.
The fuckery of layoffs, first of all. You notice a lot of them happen at the end of the month.
Hmm.
Two reasons. One, that's the end of the pay period. And two, it's funny, I'm coming up on my Bungie layoff anniversary in 2 days, October 30th, because that means your last day of health insurance is tomorrow, because your health insurance is tied to your employment, unless you sign the package documents, in which case we'll just pivot you seamlessly to Cobra. We won't take you off the insurance plan and have you wait 3 weeks while you're waiting to get put on Cobra. We'll just seamlessly slide you if you sign the documents today. That is the biggest bit of fuckery that you'll see is, we will lay you off on the 30th of the month such that tomorrow your health insurance ends. You give a clear day because that way you have a day to do the processing, because you can't process it until, like, just because health insurance companies are lazy, you can't process it until the person's actually off payroll. So you got to have that last one day to make sure you fuck everybody. So that's a thing that in the US has to go into every severance discussion, is a discussion around Cobra. Um, Most people, because they're humans, understand that they should have health insurance. In the game sector, you actually find a fair number that are like, fuck it, I'm 25 years old, I don't care.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was that way when I was 25 too, so I get it.
I mean, I was in Canada, so I was lucky, but
Right.
you know,
Um,
once you get out of the United States, the requirements around health insurance become a little bit less pressing, but they are supplemented by the need to pay your rent. That's my suggestion in collective agreements is set out a series of, like, hey, for the people in our bargaining units, this will be the automatic floor for any severance agreement, right? And just negotiate it in when it's funny money, right? When it's like, oh yeah, sure, fine, we'll make sure that your people have a week, or 2 weeks or whatever, like, or a month, or to figure out if they want to take the package, like, basically you pre-package, doing that when you're negotiating with somebody who's not staring down the barrel. They're more likely to give you concessions
mhm.
because it doesn't cost anything to give it as a concession when it's still hypothetical.
Do you think that severance packages, especially ones that are generous, are ways to hinder the workers that remain from forming a union? Or do you think that that's just like straight up from the fear of losing your job?
Tell me where you're going with this.
I guess
Walk,
I'm just
walk me into it a
curious,
little.
like I'm just curious if like there is a thought behind we have to lay people off if we make it so it's not that awful, then the people
The
left
people who
behind will think that
remain
we were,
won't
were
won't
trustworthy. Yeah.
Got it. I wanted to make sure that I was going in the direction you're going.
Okay.
Yes, I've
Great.
been involved in studio shutdowns. When I was at
Hmm.
Xbox, we shut down a few studios. And that is absolutely the conversation that's going on, is, yeah, because the people who are still behind, we want them not to be hearing from their friends that they got fucked. Everything is always a combination of there's a carrot and a stick in that I'm sort of burying a little bit, which is the carrot is, because we want these people who are left to be still, not to be sitting around all day being angry. And the stick of, listen, if if we have to shut down your studio, at least you'll be taken care of.
That's not always a promise, right?
Correct.
Gotta put it in
In
writing.
fact, in the US, there are very specific phrasings that happen depending on your state that are developed because, people got sued, and it's okay, we're not making any promises to you of future employment, but here's what here's blah blah blah, right? And so, the promise of future employment thing is the one that you're usually looking for, because 49 states in the union have at-will employment.
Hmm.
Strangely, the only one that doesn't is Montana,
Good to know. I'm gonna look into
of
that.
all places.
Wild.
And I had somebody give me an answer that made sense to me, so I accept it. The answer that I got was, well, yeah, because if you're working a ranch, you can't have people just quit one day when it's like rustling the cattle time.
Right.
And so, okay, so that explains it. Of like, you can't just quit. Well, then you can't just fire the guy either. Like, you can't fire him while he's out in the fields bringing in the cows. Same kind of
Hmm.
thing.
It sounds like it would be a bad idea.
Yeah, it's amazing how much of U.S. employment law is historically contingent.
So for Montana, is it just cause then?
For Montana, yeah, you can fire them. Well, you can fire them without cause, but you have to give them time. You have to give them a severance, or you can fire them with cause, and they're gone.
Hmm. Is there, so like, I think one thing people also don't really understand is like, what is the real reason that employers don't want unions? Can you speak to that at all?
Yes, I sort of intimated to it earlier, and I'll drill into it a little more.
Okay.
Um, with a union, there are ways you have to treat your people, and those ways are regimented. You can't be capricious. People want the opportunity to be capricious, right? Example, you hear about this all over the industry. And I remember I would sit there and be like, no, this is not at all how it works. But HR people, they always want to document, well, we had cause to fire this person because what if we get sued? And I would be like, you know who you're talking to, right? The guy who deals with it if you get sued,
Hmm.
right? And so, in the situation of a union, there's usually regimentation around termination of employees. So you get somebody in who, and I'm going to use management speak, so sorry, you get somebody in who sucks and they just don't want to fucking work, and you got to get rid of them because they're toxic. But you can't because the collective agreement says you can only terminate somebody after 2 hearings, and the hearings have to be 3 weeks apart. Okay. Now I'm stuck with this guy for a month. I just want to get rid of them, but I can't. That's the reason people don't like unions is because you have to, I said it earlier, you have to treat your people like people. One of the circumstances in which you have to treat the people like people is when you want to let them go.
Yeah.
You can't just flush somebody out of your environment.
Maintaining their ability to have power over any sort of change.
Yes. When you
It's not
hear the
necessarily about
euphemism
the
work,
money or,
yeah, when you hear the euphemism, workplace flexibility, that means I want to be able to fire people whenever I want.
that comes up a lot, I feel like, with anti-union discussions from management is like, this is going to take away our workplace flexibility. What you really like about this place being flexible is going to go away.
Yeah.
It's
And
like, it's not our flexibility.
yeah, no, exactly. And that's, well, and that's, you heard me do it a little earlier, where I talked about how basically management would elide the positions together. It's not your flexibility. Like, I mean, the 13th Amendment exists. You can't be forced to work. And so, the idea of like, well, your flexibility to leave a job you don't like will be taken away from you. No, it's not. The 13th Amendment exists.
Yeah.
Like, I can't force you to work. Like, I can't force you to sit in your chair and draw. Dumbest thing no. It's this
Um,
funny thing. Like in Europe, you get these people, you get these rules where it's 90 days each way. Like, I have to give 90 days notice if I want to leave my job. Like, what? And I always hear these things. I'm like, and it always turns into, the expression you may have heard is garden leave, where people get paid to stay home because it's like just you know what? You don't want those people in your environment anymore. But if somebody tells you they're quitting to go to another job, uh, they have to give you a certain amount of notice because there's no at-will employment in Europe,
mhm.
right? So same kind of thing of like, well, okay,
And I talk about this a lot with workers is like, we're asked to give employers 2 weeks notice if we want to leave, but they don't have to give us any notice. It could be, like you
correct,
said, on the 30th and the 31st is your last day. You lose your health insurance.
yeah,
Um,
and when people just like fuck it, I quit, right? Like the some of my favorite TikToks, um, the fuck it, I quit people, and
mhm.
it's always like, well, it's not very professional of you not to give 2 weeks notice. And I will tell you, whenever you hear the expression, it's not professional, or people expect you to behave professionally, that is an attempt to get something that they don't want to pay for. That euphemism tells you you're in the presence of somebody who's trying to get something from you for free. And it's funny. It's funny I say this. I'm actually in the process of writing a book about my Pokemon years. I have no NDA for my Pokemon years. And I remember I was having drinks with the person who took over for me at one point, and I was like, it's kind of funny that you guys are totally cool with me walking around with no NDA. And she's like, well, I guess people just expect you're going to be a pro. And I was like, being a pro doesn't include giving you a free NDA. And the way she looked at me, I was like, oh, you've never heard it said like that.
Mm-hmm.
You've never heard the express, you've never heard it be turned around. But yeah, because that's exactly it. They expect you to give them a free NDA or a
Yeah.
free whatever, right? Like behave professionally. I expect you to stay on this job that you want to be gone from. And so that's the thing that I would say also is, if you're dealing with severance discussions and a collective agreement, a thing to put in there is, you know, notice if you want a notice obligation, okay, but that notice obligation comes with garden leave,
Garden leave. I'm gonna
right?
remember
Like
that.
you can't, you're not going to force me to work. I'll tell you I'm leaving. And if you want me to wrap up anything other than just drop my tools and walk off at the end of the day, okay. But there will be additional payments involved. You're not just paying my salary.
Wild. I'd never heard of that before. I guess, is there anything else about like the boss's campaign to
There
squash
will be a
unions
lot
in
of
general?
just there'll be a lot of pressure around, well, you're not supposed to talk about your salary and your bonus. That is Section 9 protected speech.
Hmm.
Fuck you very much. Um, you still see a lot of companies out there with stupid policies like, the policy is you can't fuck you. I mean, I remember I would see those policy documents when I'd go into a company, I'd be like, oh, okay. You will see also some employers that will put non-competes into their employment agreements. I had a company explain to me that they put non-competes in California employee agreements, and I was like, those are void, right? Well, they might think they're bound. There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that shows up in contracts just because people want you to see it there and think. A contract is really two things. One, it's a statement, when properly done, it's a statement of the intention of the parties. And two, it is a document that is invoked against you for moral reasons later on. And people
Hmm.
put dumb shit in contracts all the time because they hope that it'll be, like one of my most it's trivial, but it's amusing. One of the stupidest things I ever see in contracts is sections that say this document cannot be amended except in the following way. Like this document can only be amended in a signed writing by both sides. Or this section cannot be amended. So you know how you fix that? You amend the section that says this section cannot be amended.
Right. You redline it.
Yeah, or no, just later on, you just change it and you get the other side to agree. Okay, fantastic. Then it could be amended,
Hmm.
right? Everything can be done unless, oh, well, I mean, the document says you can't do it. Fuck you. That's one to look for is in a lot of the sections of an employment agreement will say like, and this obligation cannot be changed. Well, yeah, it can. You just change it later
Yeah, I mean
because
the
you
same could be
can't
said for
bind
union
future you.
contracts.
Yeah, you
Mm.
can't bind future you in an unchangeable fashion. Again,
Right.
the 13th Amendment is valid law. And a lot of state constitutions have even broader protected worker protections than that.
Hmm.
It's funny, when I teach my entertainment law class, one year I had a bunch of students like reference the 13th Amendment in their exam answer, and I was like, did I spend too much time on this? It's a weird thing because it's the only time the Constitution affects you when you're practicing attorney, but it does. So I have to mention it. Please don't think this is all I care about, but
No.
it actually matters in the context of employment contracts. I mean, the 13th Amendment is the thing that says slavery doesn't exist in the United States. And
Yeah.
so a thing that says you have to work after you've quit is slavery.
Hmm. Or for no pay, right?
Yeah. Or even work
Um,
for pay. That's just indentured servitude.
right. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to talk to you about.
I mean, you know
I
what I
feel like
find?
we've talked about it all. When we get to the point of, so like if you've ever kind of like prepped for the point of there being a union, are employers already prepared with things that they would do, or are they scrambling and trying to
Usually it's
find
very
the
reactive.
strategy?
Usually it's very reactive. There are some, there's a reason that I describe it as the pizza party meeting. Can I
Hmm.
solve it with a pizza party? Because, like sort of one-off stupid morale things tend to be where people go immediately in these conversations. Um, People are angry. How can we make them less angry? Whatever it is, and you sort of listen to it and you think, okay, well, it sounds like everybody's complaining about the health insurance. Maybe we need to tell them we're going to look for a new health insurance provider. Oh shit, we never got one. Oh well. I
Yeah,
guess it's the same old health insurance. You know what? We couldn't find a new provider. Sorry. I think that, that kind of thing of it's basically like, how can we get out of there promising the least stuff that we can get away with, right?
lip
Can we
service,
tell them
right?
we'll look into it?
Thanks for bringing this to our attention. We're going to look
Yeah.
into that.
Thank you for letting us know. You know what? We wouldn't be in a position to solve this if we didn't know what the problem was. So thank you for bringing it up.
That's so
It's like you can
nice.
tell I've done this conversation before.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I appreciate you telling us that. That's Thank you for trusting us that we would hear this and react appropriately.
Kind of off that, like, what are the things? So, like, I often hear employers say, like, at the start of a campaign, like, we just want to educate you about your decision. What are the
Yes,
things they feel they need to, like, quote unquote, let the workers know?
that when if you unionize, a lot of the perks of this job go away. Do you enjoy being able to just leave your job and go to the doctor? Because if there's a lot of rules in place, well, those rules will bind you as well as bind us. The flexibility you enjoy currently in being able to schedule a doctor's appointment for 11 o'clock in the morning, you might not have that anymore. We will have to treat everybody equally. And, that might mean we have to give all of your colleagues the ability to go to the doctor at 11 in the morning. And, we can't ask you to bear in mind the needs of the team because we have to treat you in a way. That's what that's the education campaign. The
Yeah,
education campaign is make sure you understand that this might lead to you losing all the things you like about your job. You'll turn into a clock puncher.
definitely heard that one.
Yep. I was about to say you can't not have heard the word clock puncher.
Definitely heard that one.
Given what you do for a living, that term has come up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the way they ultimately want to educate workers is to basically scare them into thinking they don't understand. But
Yep.
what we've done as organizers is make sure that people are educated and understand.
Yes, we will
Um,
give you actual education.
mhm.
We will not scare you.
We're here to tell you your rights and
Yep.
how you can be
We
protected
will
under the
tell you
law.
things that scare them. So there is scary in this conversation. It's just not scary for you.
They react that way because they're scared of
Yep.
us, you know?
Yep. Because, the workers have the ability to do two things. One is to work and the other is to not work.
Yeah,
And they're so focused on making sure you do the first one and not do the second one. We give you the ability to do the second one and not get fired for it. And that's, and I'll see you and I'll raise you. And that's I often quote Billy Bragg. I met him when
love
I was in
Billy Bragg.
college. He's a nice
Hmm.
guy. There is power in a union. There is power in a factory, power in the hand of the worker. That is the power that's in the hand of the worker. The crack about like every American is a temporarily embarrassed millionaire, and that's why everybody loves the tax cuts here.
Hmm.
Um, every worker is a not yet management worker in their mind, if nowhere else. And the more you can do to remind them, you could be in management someday, both. And therefore you might want to be a good boy or girl here, but more importantly, you don't want to be in a position where, oh, you were an activist, the whole that shit follows you around kind of thing.
Mm. Yeah, I hear about that, like idea of a blacklist.
Yep.
And
And there are no actual blacklists, right?
yeah.
But as with so many industries, this one is a everybody knows everybody industry.
Hmm.
Like it's funny. I have this reaction every now and then when I see people describe themselves as video game lawyers, and I'm like, how come I've never heard of you? Because if you were a video game lawyer, how have I never come across you in 20 fucking years?
Right, yeah.
Right? And it's very much like video game lawyer is a job people just they just give themselves one day. And so it's just the idea of, like we all talk, we all know each other. And so there isn't really, because we don't really care. But if somebody's a real fucking problem, that follows around. But I'll tell you, like there were 1,600 people at Bungie when I was there, of whom, if I was temperamentally inclined, 10 of them were real fucking problems. One of them, because he's a sovereign citizen.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah, I had to deal with sovereign citizens. Those people are fucking weirdos, by the way. If you
Okay.
come across one of those, just run.
Okay.
Because I was just like, this guy, one, he's an asshole, and two, they're all always heavily armed. There were 400 people when I was at Pokemon. There's not a one that I would think of was a real fucking problem.
Hmm.
Like, there's just not even, and were they annoying when I was there? Some of them, yeah, but like, really, you don't freak out too much. Like,
Yeah.
we all know that sometimes people had shitty bosses, and that's the reason that they're cranky.
We're not ultimately just like, and I just want to like add this context to this
Yeah.
conversation just because it's not because we're like cranky for no reason. We're validly upset with our working conditions and
Oh
we
yeah.
ultimately want to make positive change, you
Yes.
know. But management would just say like they're just disgruntled, they're just angry.
Yeah.
Let's just put the kibosh on it. And I think it is like really important to note that like you work with like 1,600 people, only 10 people are a problem, but like are those the people who are just the squeaky wheel, you know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
the rest of the workers, again, like our organizing method is to keep things kind of like grassroots, underground, whispered network kind of deal. Probably wouldn't see it coming from the rest of that group, right?
I'm going to pivot back to something you said a minute ago
Hmm.
and pull a thread,
Sure.
which is this. Yes, people, when I described cranky, you described as having good reasons for, being dissatisfied. Um, I'm going to shoot the gap on that and say the proper functioning of the machine requires when you have a shitty boss, just shut the fuck up and do your job. People that are like, a real problem is often the person who won't just shut the fuck up and do their job because they expect to be treated like a person. And I'm a little hesitant on this because, I'm reminded of, I found out after I left Pokemon that there was a guy on my team who was apparently kind of an asshole. And that people wouldn't tell me about it because they were like, because we knew you needed him to be better than he was. I'm sorry that that's how you saw the situation and you couldn't tell me about it.
Hmm.
But just, the company needs management to be better than they are. And so, like, please don't make me fire that manager because then I got to find somebody to run that team.
Right.
And that's different than finding somebody beyond that team. Sometimes, the organization process helps you find out who are the people you should have fired last year because they were terrible managers. And so, that's why I say I wanted to pull that thread a little bit is, at the end of the day, I mean, there are definitely industries that have benefited from from the unions in ways that you could even get the management to say it out loud, right? Like I think, for example, the movie business has done very well by having everybody on a gig in ways that if you had permanent employee actors, like then you got to find stuff for them to do. You end up like with the studio system from the 40s and the 50s where everybody was just doing crappy movies all the time because it
Mm-hmm.
was something to keep them occupied so they didn't get bored and leave and go somewhere else, right? Like the same kind of thing here. There is room, I think, from the worker side to remind management that we make it, having us happy is to your benefit because we will give our best work in an environment where we're happy. And nobody's going to go on work to rule in an environment where they like their job. People go on work to rule because they have a reason. And I think that's, a little bit of a when it's organization time, a little bit of a message that could probably help y'all when you're doing your good work because you want us happier than we are right now.
Absolutely. We all want to be happy.
Yeah. And you want a reputation of everyone here likes their job.
A positive working environment, especially in games, is like a huge draw for great candidates, right?
Yep. Yeah. Now I want to
Um,
give you the flip side of that because the positive working environment is two things in games, and it isn't. It's only one thing in most of the working world, right?
okay.
You don't get people who are fans of Nabisco.
I love those
Trying to
cookies.
pick
Not
the
just
most
that.
stupid example I could use because I
No,
almost use a
I
car
totally
company
understand
analogy.
though.
There are car
Yeah,
fans, but gaming companies, one of the things that they could get away with is low pay because you're working on a game you love.
100%. I know that
And we
feeling
totally
from
took advantage of that
animation.
at Bungie,
Hmm.
right? We hired fans because fans would work for less.
Right.
And I remember saying at one point, I was like, when I came over from Pokemon to Bungie, about 1 in 3 people asked me, how much of a pay cut are they making you take? You don't want that fucking reputation. But the people would look at me out loud and say, I assume they're making you take a pay cut. How much? That's a horrible reputation for you to have.
Wow. Hmm.
Yep. But when you only hire fans, you can get away with that.
Don, this has been extremely enlightening, and I so appreciate you sharing all this insider info. Um,
You know how to find me if I can be useful in the future.
Absolutely, and I will definitely take you up on that. It's always great to have somebody like you in our corner. We need more folks coming to this side.
The industry needs unions.
Hmm.
In fact, the industry needs IATSE on a level that it barely understands.
We're getting there every day.
Please continue to kick ass.
Appreciate it, Don.
Yep,
I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk again very soon.
you bet. See ya.
Thanks, Don.
Bye.
Bye.